can't think as people do. The machine is different.
Being, what marvelous being! How gratifying! How gratifying!
The question really today for me was like, what should I talk about with reference to this movie? And if you've seen the trailers, you might know the movie is a lot about a couple of European ethnobotanists who go to the Amazon and interact with the native populations, native Indian tribes, etc. A lot about drug use, hallucinogenic drugs, discovery, and spirit travel related things to that. I actually haven't seen the whole movie, so I'm just filling in with. I decided I didn't want to talk about ethnobotany and drugs and the use of the things that they find in the movie as part of the introduction or to start the movie. I would be delighted if we had a conversation about it later. It's a complicated topic, and there are a lot of other people who know as much about it in the audience probably as I do. So I thought I would start today by talking about part of the backstory of this movie. And part of the backstory about this movie is the previous interaction of Europeans with the Amazon tribes and the people that lived in the Amazon rainforest and how they had come to know Europeans. And there are scenes that pop up throughout the movie that reference the history of rubber and rubber extraction from the Amazon. So I thought as part of the science on screen, I would talk a little bit about the history of rubber and a little bit about what rubber is and how it played a role in industrial development, modern society. So I'm going to ask you to start with, so this is one little bit of rubber. What is so spectacular and awesome about rubber? Give me one characteristic that makes rubber unique. It's elasticity, right? Which means that you can change it and it will go back to its original shape. Do you know anything else that's elastic? Rubber. Other pieces of rubber. I feel like Monty Python all of a sudden. More rubber.
Skin
Yeah,
has
rubber.
elasticity.
Huh?
Since skin has elasticity.
Skin, that's great. While it's alive, right? Yeah.
What?
Skin, she said. What else is amazing about rubber? What are some other properties that you would say that rubber has?
Strong.
Lightweight, okay. Strong. Yes, waterproof, right? It can layer out in the environment. It can go underwater. Put it anywhere you want. It is waterproof. And it's also what? What's sort of related to that? It can be. It's an electrical insulator. Sitting out in the environment.
Durable.
Extremely durable, yeah. Waterproof, corrosion-proof, durable. It's not only durable in just sitting around somewhere, but it's very durable if you're using it. So you can put it somewhere and things will pass over and you can rub on things and it doesn't just, think about wood. Think about the first bicycles which had wooden tires, essentially some spokes, and you're riding around on the road. How long does your wooden wheel last? A couple of weeks. Rubber is extremely durable. So it's durable, it's flexible or elastic, it's waterproof, it's chemically resistant. It also turns out to be airtight. If you make an enclosure made out of rubber, it's airtight, it's watertight, at the same time as being flexible. And I challenge you to think of anything else that's flexible and is watertight. Like metal is, glass is, but neither of them are flexible. Anything that's watertight, leather is, but it's not elastic. It doesn't have durability. Rubber is unique in all of the world. Now tell me some things that you know of in the world that are made out of rubber. Yes. Condoms, of course. So where would birth control be without rubber? Right? How many people would be still walking around on the planet? What else? What else do we do with rubber?
Balls.
Yeah, so sports, right? Almost every kind of athletic, from tennis balls to golf balls to soccer balls, they all require basketballs. So sports, what else in sports uses rubber? Yeah, right, so, right? And you can go on and on about sports equipment that uses rubber. What else, where else can you think of where rubber is important? Somebody mentioned it.
Tires.
So tires. You couldn't have airplanes. Can you imagine an airplane if rubber doesn't exist? How are you going to land that thing? Yeah, just crash it into a building. So any kind of transportation, from bicycles, motorcycles, they all require rubber. Someone mentioned that it's an insulator. We would not be able to use electricity in any of the ways that we're familiar with electricity if we didn't have rubber. How about another example? Where else do we use rubber?
Medicine.
Yes, so in a hospital. In what way are you thinking in a hospital?
Gloves.
Yeah, so protective gear, right? Anything that you, because it's waterproof or watertight, corrosion resistant, you can put your hands into any sorts of chemicals. It's heat tolerant, so you can sterilize it and wash it with bleach and anything else. It doesn't degrade or destroy the equipment. Still looking for a couple of other things.
Roofing.
Roofing, all right, so some kinds of roofing are made out of rubber. Not to confuse it with asphalt, but what's that?
Rubber bands.
Rubber bands hold things together. Seals. All right, so gaskets. Think of all the gaskets, and someone mentioned a hospital. You've got a syringe. The only thing that makes the syringe possible is that you have a gasket that's corrosion resistant, will flex when you need it to, airtight, on and on. Hoses, no one's yet mentioned hoses or rubber tubing. That you can move anything you want from one place to another, whether it's corrosive, whether it's hot, whether it's cold, in a rubber hose or some variation on rubber tubing. Think about hydraulics. How much of the world runs on hydraulics? All of your big equipment, all of your things that you really move large amounts of stuff require hydraulics, and you can't have hydraulics without a flexible, durable, extremely strong tube in which to pump that high pressure liquid. So where does rubber come from? Rubber comes from trees, yes, from the Amazon rainforest, and that's what really how it connects to this movie. When Europeans first entered the Amazon rainforest, they were looking for golden statues and they were looking for other precious gems and metals, but they discovered rubber. The Amazon rainforest, tribal people had found a tree called Hevea brasiliensis, and if you score it, out comes this milky white latex. We call it latex because it's like the trees giving milk, lactating. And we call some plants milkweed when we cut them and the white latex comes out. But Hevea brasiliensis latex, if you dry it, it eventually becomes a semi-solid. And if you heat it up, it becomes softer and you can shape it, and when it cools, it'll hold that shape. It's somewhat flexible, it's somewhat elastic, so you can punch it or move it. It's very, very durable, so you can make a little statue, an icon out of rubber, and it would never rot. So think about it in the Amazon rainforest. You don't have precious metals. You make something out of rubber, but you can put it somewhere, and for generations, there it sits. Europeans found this stuff to be interesting, took it back to Europe, looked at it, thought, what do we do with this? And somebody figured out that, yes, you can use it to erase things. So the first commercial use of rubber was simply to remove writing from paper. For a long time, that's all that anybody knows what to do with it. There's no other sort of apparent utility to it. Until eventually, one of the things that was discovered was you can take rubber, raw, just dried rubber, latex, that's been cured usually over a smoking fire, and dip it into paint thinner, and it goes from a solid to a liquid. And think about today, like latex paint. Well, like, what is that going to be good for? And somebody, the guy who did that, had the bright idea. What if I dip fabric in it, I pull the fabric out, and I hang it to dry, and all the paint thinner evaporates, and what's left behind is my rubber, but it's impregnated into the fabric. And now I have a sheet of watertight, airtight material. And from that, I could manufacture many things. I could make boots. I could make waders. I could make rubber gloves. I could make a whole set of different things, just big things that I could, big jackets that I could go outside in the rain and in the cold, and I would stay dry because instead of wearing wool, I'm wearing something impregnated, waterproof, and rubber. Eventually, Charles McIntosh comes up with a slightly better way to do this and invents what we call the Mac, right? The big raincoat jacket that's in the mid-1900s was the way you would dress if you were going outside. The problem with that product was that if it got hot, it went back into its liquid form, essentially melted. You make rubber boots out of fabric impregnated with rubber and then evaporated, and you go out in the winter, what happens? Yes, right, so that raw rubber, when it gets cold, becomes incredibly brittle, and anything that hits it breaks it, and you'll never put it back together. If it gets hot, it'll drip and run and stick, and all parts of your boot will be stuck together, and you'll never get it apart again. An interesting development is this guy named Charles Goodyear, who fancies himself an inventor. No training, not a scientist, no chemistry, but he's always trying to invent the next big thing. He ends up in debtor prison for a while because he's not really making inventions that make any money, but he's convinced he's going to do it. One day he walks by a shop and they have some rubber garments there, some boots and some rain jackets and other things. And he walks in and talks to the store owner, who says there's also this like inner tube thing that somebody's invented with a valve in it. And Goodyear asked him, so is it good? Does it work? You know, what can you use it for? And the guy says, well, actually, it's not very useful because the valve doesn't work. When you pump air into it, it just gradually leaks out. So I have it here, but I don't think it's a really real value because it doesn't do, you know, you can't actually inflate it. So Charles Goodyear buys one. What's he do that for? Yeah, he wants to take it home, take the valve apart, and make a better valve. He spends a year perfecting the valve, goes back to the store to tell the store owner, I figured it out finally, I perfected the valve, and there's no rubber anything in the store. And he asks the store owner, like, what happened to all the rubber? And the guy opens a closet and says, oh, it's in here. One day the sun came out and all the stuff in my display window got very hot and dripped and goo and fell into a lump at the bottom, and I just scooped it all up and threw it in the closet. The stuff is useless. Nobody will ever buy anything made out of rubber. And so here, Charles Goodyear has the valve, but rubber provides no real, you can't make anything out of it that anybody would want to use because it will get too hot or too cold somewhere. So now he goes home and says, I have to fix that. If I can create rubber that doesn't melt when it's hot, that doesn't crack when it's cold, then the world will change. And that takes him a long time as well. One day he's standing over a stove. Again, he's not a scientist. He just throws some of this and some of this together. It doesn't work. Throw a little of that in there. That doesn't work. Tries hundreds of combinations randomly, throwing stuff together. What's he throw together? Some sulfur and some lead and some of his rubber, raw rubber, and he's mixing it over a stove. And he's stirring it, and he's arguing with somebody who's calling him a fool. It's like, you'll never do anything, Charles Goodyear. You're a loser. And he gets agitated, and he spills some on top of the little wood stove he's stirring it over. And when it hits that, it steams and gets very hot and then turns solid. And he discovers vulcanization. So you take rubber, heat it in the presence of sulfur and lead, like a volcano. And suddenly you have a product that is, in fact, flexible, elastic, but it never doesn't change when you heat it. It maintains that elasticity and durability. It doesn't crack when it's cold, doesn't melt when it's hot, and indeed the world does change. Shortly after that, someone takes his valve, takes the idea of a pneumatic tire, sticks it on a bicycle, and suddenly the bicycle craze begins. Everybody wants a bicycle. Next thing, of course, is what? What comes after the bicycle craze? Cars. Every car needs 4 tires. The tires have to run for, 10,000 miles ideally. So it has to be very durable, rugged material, and every flat tire has to be replaced with a new tire. So the world develops a huge appetite for rubber. And where does it come from? It all comes from the Amazon rainforest. Finally, what's going on in the Amazon rainforest? You know the Amazon rainforest is incredibly diverse. Huge variety and diversity of plants that live in the Amazon rainforest, which means if you go there looking for one plant, you will find one here, and then you walk a ways and walk, and then you find another one, and then you walk in that direction for a while, and maybe you'll eventually find another one. You don't find plants in the Amazon rainforest living in thickets or packets or, close to each other. Hevia brasiliensis, the rubber tree, lives that way in the Amazon rainforest. There is a disease of rubber that spreads from tree to tree, but when the trees are widely scattered, the disease and the tree population are in balance. Only occasionally does a tree get sick, and just like us, children, if they don't go to nursery school, the chances your child will get a cold are a lot lower than if you pack them into a room with some other sick children. And so people, Europeans and others, want to grow lots of Hevia brasiliensis to produce this fabulous wealth-making product. But every time they do a plantation, they get sick and they all die. So we're back to the only way to collect the latex is to walk in the rainforest, find the trees, score the trees, just like collecting maple sap, put a little bucket under it, come back late that day, empty the little bucket into a bigger bucket, score it again, put your little latex cup there, and do this on what's called a trap line, essentially. So you have to walk many miles to get a little bit of latex, no other choice. Who's going to do all that work? The indigenous Native Americans. Are they interested in the work? No, they're like, I don't have any interest in working for whatever your baubles are or your money or whatever. So in order for the industry to grow in the Amazon rainforest requires a pretty brutal regime of slavery of the native population. And that's part of what's referenced in the movie, is that the native population then begins to view Europeans as vicious, violent people who will come and take your children and enslave you and force you to do things that you're not interested in. The remaining part of this story, one brief little part of where this goes later, is that someone smuggled, the British actually, smuggled rubber seeds out of the Amazon rainforest and take them to Kew Gardens and eventually take them to India, where their colony of India, and start growing rubber in India. And then it spreads to Indonesia and Malaysia. And by the 1920s, no one's collecting rubber in the Amazon rainforest anymore, not any sort of significant amounts. There are now giant plantations of rubber in Malaysia and Indonesia, and that's where the world's rubber comes from. And it can grow in plantations there because the disease has never made it from the Amazon to Malaysia. So what happens in World War II? By World War II, the United States is using 600,000 tons of rubber every year. 600,000 tons of rubber are imported into the United States to make tires, to make tubing, to make conveyor belts, all of these things. Yes, so the story is that once the world's center of rubber production leaves the Amazon and goes to Malaysia and Indonesia, as the Japanese occupy Southeast Asia, the Allied forces discover we have no access to rubber, but we have to have rubber. It's said that the average soldier fighting in World War II needed 32 pounds of rubber to outfit his gear, his boots, his clothing, his weapons, his transportation. The US and our Allied forces had to have rubber to fight that war. So one part of this video is Robert Schultes, who had been exploring in the Amazon on his own interest, really, looking for plants that people use for medicinal or various other purposes. He's hired by the US government to go to the Amazon and try to find a rubber tree growing in the Amazon that's resistant to the disease. Because that hope is that we could reestablish rubber production within areas controlled by the Allies, rather than losing the war essentially for one reason: we don't have access to rubber. And then the other part was to create the Rubber Reserve Company, which was the federal government all-out effort, whatever it costs, whatever it takes to create synthetic rubber on a large enough scale. The chemists had already figured out how to take butadiene and polymerize it into synthetic rubber, but they were making a few hundred tons a year, and we needed 600,000 tons a year. And it had to figure out how to take crude oil, petroleum, make it into butadiene on that scale. The federal government paid private companies to build 52 different factories to mass produce synthetic rubber. And by the end of the war, synthetic rubber has replaced about 2/3 of the world's use of rubber. Today, same thing. About 30% of the world's rubber comes from Southeast Asia, from real trees, and about 60 to 70% of the rubber we use today in the modern world to create everything around us is synthetics made from petroleum. But that's the history really about rubber and its impact and its relationship to Europeans going to the Amazon rainforest and exploring the rainforest, discovering something, and then creating a huge demand for it and meeting that demand.
What happened to natural selection and the immunity? Why not let the trees that were in clusters, those that were resistant, take
Yeah,
over?
there just weren't any resistant trees.
You mentioned there were.
No, he went looking, I'm sorry. What he was sent there was to go and find,
Any
do
that
your
were
thing in the
resistant?
Amazon and
Okay.
see if you can find a resistant tree.
Yeah.
All right?
Do trees have immunity? Do plants have? They do, right?
Yes, they do, usually. But in this case, the immunity was created by just the trees always being
messing
widely
around.
spaced. Yep. It falls apart, it doesn't work when they're crowded together. Yeah. So I think also after the video, after the movie, we'll talk about whatever you guys want to talk about, the other ethnobotanical stuff.
I was just gonna say, you said that there's a lot of synthetic rubber made from petroleum, but isn't that a fossil fuel which is also totally unsustainable?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, so Yeah, there are lots of interest in going back and trying to figure out a way to increase the amount of natural rubber that we use as a replacement for fossil fuels. Yeah.